Hi, welcome to Grok TiddlyWiki. I'm Soren Bjornstad, the author of Grok TiddlyWiki, and in this video I'm just going to give you a brief tour of how Grok TiddlyWiki works. So, Grok TiddlyWiki I sometimes call a book, but it's really kind of an interactive environment for learning TiddlyWiki with a number of features that are not necessarily present in many learning resources or paper books. So Grok TiddlyWiki is actually written in TiddlyWiki. This has a number of advantages. For instance, if we want to show an example of how you can do something in TiddlyWiki, it can be shown just live right within the book. It also just gives you a little bit of reinforcement on what you're learning because you are using the tool in another place. But it also means that if you've never used TiddlyWiki before at all, and you're trying to use Grok TiddlyWiki to learn it, you might have a little trouble getting around it first because you're not familiar with how TiddlyWiki works. So in this video and in the how to use this book section of Grok TiddlyWiki overall, we're just going to kind of go through a brief tour of how the book works and what features you might not be familiar with so that you can get a head start and be comfortable jumping into the book. So the first thing you may notice here is that the screen is kind of divided into two components. On the left here is the story river, which is going to contain the actual content that you are reading. And on the right here is the sidebar, which is going to allow you to navigate to other places within the wiki. The sidebar contains a number of different tabs here, so we're just going to go over those briefly. First is contents, which is where it's going to open up, and this is going to show the chapters and the sections within the chapters all the way through Grok TiddlyWiki. So starting from the front matter and installing TiddlyWiki and getting started, all the way down to complicated customizations and resources and appendices. There is a full outline as well, which you can get to by clicking either Go to Full Outline or from anywhere this outline link at the top of the sidebar. That is going to contain the same thing as the contents sidebar. For instance, the chapters and sections here are the same ones that are showing up over here, but it is also going to give you a brief summary of every section. So if you just want to kind of get a 10,000-foot overview of the book, or if you're looking for how to do something but you don't know what it's called, so you don't know what to search for, you can read through this summary and find the appropriate section. There is also a tab called Open. So to demonstrate how Open works, I'm going to click on, just navigate through a couple of items here. As we do this, TiddlyWiki is going to replace the Tiddler and the Story River with the new one, but it is going to keep the other ones open. So this works very much like the tabs in your browser. So, you might right-click on a link as you're going along and say Open Link in New Tab, right? What that's going to do, if you're familiar with tab browsing at all, is it's going to open up a new tab up here, which is going to take you to the new page, but it's going to leave this old tab open so that we can still come back to it later. And so that's exactly what TiddlyWiki does here. As I click on an item here, it's going to pop open a new entry over here, which it just did links. But if I want to go back to Contact Tiddlers, where I just was, I can do that. And I can flip quickly back and forth between different things. I can close ones that I'm no longer using. And I can close everything with Close All, or this button up here, if I get tired of what I have open and I just want to kind of have a clean slate. You can also bookmark individual sections, so if you come back to something very frequently or you just want to kind of hold on to your place, you can click on this star icon here, and that is going to make it show up in the bookmarks section here. So if I close out of it, I can then quickly reopen it. If you don't want it bookmarked anymore, you can click on the star again, or you can use the trash can icon in the bookmarks section. Now you might notice that something fairly obvious is missing from there, which is when I've read one section, how do I get to the next section? And you do that using the footer here over in the story river. So there are going to be a number of navigation options here. There is a next section. There would be a previous section if this weren't the very first section in the book. And there is an up button, which is going to take you from any section in a chapter to that chapter. There's also a button here called Show Related Topics. If you click on that, what this is actually going to do is show all of the links going both directions. So if I link to something, for instance here, this is a link to the acknowledgements, then the acknowledgements is going to show up in this Mentioned by Welcome to Grok TiddlyWiki. Similarly, if I link to Welcome to Grok TiddlyWiki from somewhere else, it's going to show up over here. So this is a great way to find other relevant information which might not be in the same chapter or right next to it, but could assist in your understanding, especially if you have to jump ahead and kind of skip over some stuff earlier in the book. You might find that you're missing some information that you need to understand it, and this can kind of give you a summary of those topics. Let's just click on a couple of these so we can see how they work, right? So we can move on to Why TiddlyWiki, we can move on to Philosophy of Grok TiddlyWiki, and so on. Those are going to show up in the Open tab just like before. If we click on Front Matter, that's going to take us up to the Chapters page. One last thing here, there is a button called Send Feedback. If you find something wrong with the book, or there's just something that you think could be improved, you can fill in some your email address here, and if you want me to be able to contact you. If you don't have to fill that in. And then you can just say, hey, I thought something could be better. And then that is going to send it off where I can look at that and consider your changes for the next edition. So if you find errors, typos, just things you didn't understand, please help me make the book better for you and send that information on over. That's how you navigate around the book. So far, we haven't really seen anything that you couldn't do in a typical book, except maybe the full text search here. So, if I want to look for anything that talks about tiddlers, I can do that here. That you would even have in a typical ebook. What's really going to make Grok TiddlyWiki different is its interactive features. So there are 3 that I'd like to go over here. One is exercises, one is live examples, and finally takeaways. So as you're learning about TiddlyWiki by reading Grok TiddlyWiki, at some point you're going to actually have to put your new knowledge into action if you want to fully understand it, right? If you're just reading all the stuff you can do in the wiki and you read the entire book, you're probably not going to really understand how it works, why you would want to do things that way, and that means you're probably not going to remember things very well. So as you're going along, one thing that often happens is that it will just ask you to follow along in your sample wiki, which you create early on in the Grok TiddlyWiki course. So, for instance, here it's going to instruct you to pop open your control panel, scroll down to a particular section, fill in a particular value. And so you'll do that and you'll actually see how it works right as you're reading through it. In other cases, you might learn something and then be asked to kind of go off on your own and work with it using these exercises, which come in these boxes here. So it's going to give you a prompt for what you should do. In some of these cases, it's going to be pretty obvious when you've completed the exercise successfully. In other cases, though, there will be a canonical answer. The answer is not necessarily the only correct answer, but it will give you something to compare your answer to and make sure that you came up with something sensible. And you can just click the show answer or hide answer there to so that you can try it out without seeing the answer right away. When you have completed an exercise, you can tick this complete box here. That's going to change the background color so that it's a little bit more obvious when you're scrolling through the list which ones you've finished. That is also going to make an entry in the exercise browser, which you can come out to by clicking on exercises here at any time. In the exercise browser, you're going to be able to look for exercises that you finished, exercises that you haven't finished. You can limit it to a particular section if you want to see, just the section we were just looking at, the 5 exercises there, the ones we've completed, the ones we haven't completed. So this will give you a way to just kind of see how you're going, how you're doing on the exercises. And if you have to skip over some exercises and you later want to come back to them, this is a really fast way to find which ones you haven't done yet. So exercises, there's a couple nice features there to keep track of what you're doing, but again, that's probably something that you've seen in paper textbooks as well. These next 2 features are going to be things that we couldn't really do on paper. So the first thing is live examples. So let's look at a live example. You're going to see these throughout the book. And what this does is on the left here, you're going to see the wiki text that you would type into a tiddler. This is a kind of markup language that describes what you want to make of the content of a tiddler. But then over here on the right, you're going to see exactly what it looks like once you've done it. You can click on wiki text and output to see just the left or the right if you just want a little more space for it. The coolest thing here is the ability to edit it. So in some places you may be instructed to do this. In other places you just may want to do it on your own in order to kind of experiment. So let's say I wanted to say, what happens if I take out this break here? Well, that doesn't look very nice, does it? So I can experiment here, and I can see, I don't know, what would it look like if I made this bold? And so you can just play around with it as much as you want. When you're done, you do have this option to restore original if you change it. So that will make sure that you don't mess it up and you're unable to get back to the original example presented by the textbook. You will also see there's an option to copy the wiki text to the clipboard. So if you want to pull it out of Grok TiddlyWiki and pull it into your own sample wiki to play with it further, you can click that and you'll be able to paste that text directly into your wiki. Lastly, takeaways. So this is the most complicated. It's also probably the most helpful of these interactive features. So takeaways, in short, are flashcards, but they're a very special kind of flashcards. So they have two purposes. The first one is just as a quick reading comprehension check. So, we've read this section on tiddlers, and now at the end, we'll be asked a couple to a few questions discussing the most important ideas in that section to make sure that we've picked them up. So what's the basic unit of information in TiddlyWiki called? Well, that's the tiddler. That's the topic of this section. And so we can say, yep, I remembered that answer. Here we're being asked to fill in the blank. In TiddlyWiki, everything is... And let's say I don't remember that. I'm going to click Show Answer. Oh, everything is a tiddler. That's also the topic of this section, right? So I'm going to say I forgot this one. And we'll just click through everything else. There were only 3 there. We would just proceed through as many as there were, saying the answer to ourselves and evaluating whether we remembered it or not. Once you've done that, you will have the option to come into the list to see all of them if you like. And you'll notice that here it marks off the next review of each of these. So this is the really cool part of takeaways, is that takeaway will actually keep track of when you need to see these questions again in order to maintain optimal memory of them. So you can see that this one here, right, we forgot. And so it says, oh, you need to see that one again tomorrow to help you relearn it since you didn't remember it initially. Whereas these, it says, oh, you can wait a few days because you picked it up easily after reading the section. And as we go through and review these multiple times, as we continue learning TiddlyWiki, it will keep updating based on whether we forgot or remembered the cards, and it will show the ones that we forget frequently much more often so that we are able to maintain them because it recognizes they're harder. To see how the review experience looks, I'm going to come in and do a little behind-the-scenes magic. Don't try this at home. Basically, what I'm going to do is make it move up all the reviews that were due tomorrow to today. So it's like it's May 3rd tomorrow instead of May 2nd. And you'll notice that when I did that, this banner showed up here that says you have takeaways due for review. Click here to start a review session. So let's click to start a review session. You can see that there is one takeaway due for review today. We've collected 3. That means we've initially come to the card and answered it in the text. And there are a total of 543 if we go through the entire book that will eventually be shown. You can see that the one that it's chosen to present to us is the one that we forgot. So in TiddlyWiki, everything is. Today I'm going to remember, oh, it's a tiddler. Here, instead of just forgot or remember, we actually have 4 options. Remembered and good are the same thing. That means, yep, I got it, everything's great. Hard and easy are presented in case you find that it's showing something to you way too frequently, like it's too easy, or not frequently enough, it's too hard. So you can just kind of click those to give a hint to the scheduler, saying, I don't really like the way you've been showing this, can you do it a little bit differently? In this case, however, it was good, so I'm going to click on good. Before I do that, though, I just want to point out these 2 options here, edit and uncollect. So edit is going to allow you to change the wording if you want to. I can click there, and then I'll be able to say, in some other application, everything is a tiddler. And then when I come back to it, it's going to show that in the future. I also have the option to uncollect, which means if I don't want to see this again at all, I can just remove it from review by clicking uncollect. But in this case, I'm going to say it was good. And now that banner is going to have gone away over here, and it's going to tell us we are all caught up. So every day that you work on Grok TiddlyWiki, you can come in here, pop open that reviewer, take a moment to review what you've learned on previous days, and then once you're caught up, you can proceed into new sections. In addition, if you just don't have time to work on learning TiddlyWiki for a while, try to just come in every day or every couple days and spend 5 minutes reviewing. That's going to make it much less painful to pick up later. Even if you have to skip working much on TiddlyWiki for a couple months, as long as you keep reviewing those takeaways, you're going to remember all the core concepts, and it's going to be very easy to come back to it later. So this is, I think, the most revolutionary thing about Grok TiddlyWiki, if there is anything, is this spaced repetition flashcards. And if you click on Help, you can learn much more about the science behind that and how it works, and how takeaway works within Grok TiddlyWiki as well. One last thing I'll show here is the takeaway browser. So this is going to allow us to see all of the questions that we've collected, or in fact the ones that we haven't collected. And you can see here this interval tab here. This is just the number of days until you see it again. So we can see that after our second review, these are still at 5 days, due on May 7th, whereas the one that we forgot is now due on May 5th, so a little bit sooner. It didn't schedule it 5 days out because it saw that we forgot it the first time, so we're going to need to see it a little bit sooner this time. That is Grok TiddlyWiki. So if this still seems good to you, I would go ahead and get started. You could read through the rest of how to use this book, or just jump into the first chapter here and with installing TiddlyWiki. Thank you very much. Enjoy Grok TiddlyWiki.